What the Border Collie surgeon saw after midnight left every monitor scrolling static before something slithered across the table. It was past midnight in room 13. The red surgical light cast long shadows over polished steel. Dr. Marlowe's gloved hands hovered above the patient. The air felt slick and damp on her skin. A low hum of ventilators pulsed through the hall. Rain pelted the windows in heavy sheets. The temperature hovered just above 40 degrees. Every surface felt bone cold to the touch. At 17 minutes after midnight, the infrared scanner flickered. A shape appeared above the table. It shifted and pulsed like liquid glass. The scanner read no heat signature. Dr. Marlowe leaned in, breath caught in her throat. Her heartbeat drummed in her ears. A distant thunderclap rattled the walls. Without warning, the shape rippled. The edges bent reality around it. The steel instruments blurred. A cold draft rose from the floor. The life support monitors briefly flatlined. Then the hum returned deeper and more resonant. The anomaly hovered for 3 silver heartbeats. It whispered in frequencies below hearing. Dr. Marlowe froze. Her gloved fingers tightened on the scanner. The figure warped, then vanished entirely. All that remained was the steady drip of saline and the fading echo of that impossible presence. Case File 006. Classification: Threat Level 5. Forensic Synopsis: The subject is a Border Collie Anthro hybrid known as Dr. Marlowe, a forensic surgeon assigned to the night shift at St. Augustine Medical Institute. The incident occurred in Surgical Wing Room 13 at 12:17 hours on October 5, 2025, during severe storm conditions with the backup generator active. Environmental readings recorded ambient temperature at 42 degrees Fahrenheit, red surgical lighting at 60 lumens, and continuous hum at 65 decibels. The anomaly registered as a nonthermal, spatial distortion, manifesting in infrared scans and producing subaudible vibrations. Its origin remains unknown. Effects included temporary life support, flatlining, and reality warping visual distortions. The following transcript compiles the unedited audio logs, infrared scan data, and Dr. Marlowe's notes. All timestamps are spelled out in words. Archival inserts are italicized. Proceed with caution. It began at 12:59 minutes after midnight. Dr. Marlowe's gloved foot tapped against the steel floor. The red surgical lamp above flickered once, then steadied into its steady, pulsing glow. A low static hiss rose from the defibrillator panel on her right. The scent of antiseptic mixed with damp concrete and ozone from the storm breaching the broken window seals. She adjusted the infrared overlay on the scanner. It glowed pale emerald against the chilled steel of the instrument tray. Each tool lay arranged by size, its polished surface cold as ice. Rain drummed in heavy sheets against the small reinforced window at the room's far side. Thunder grumbled in the distance like a restless beast. The backup fans were thrummed through the vents. Every surface was slick underfoot, coated in an almost imperceptible film of moisture. At 1:14 minutes after 1, a spike in the infrared readout drew her attention. The anomaly returned. It hovered above the patient's chest, motionless. The heartbeat monitor flatlined with a single, prolonged tone. Dr. Marlowe's breath left a faint mist on the scanner lens. Her pulse throbbed in her wrist like a war drum. The scanner's readout glitched, numbers spelled out in words scrolling too fast. The shape quivered, then stretched like smoke, trapped within a glass cube. It shifted in grades of darkness, as if composed of shadow rather than solid matter. No heartbeat, no thermal signature, yet it was there. She pressed a gloved finger to the monitor. The flatline tone sliced through the static hiss. Electricity crackled along the metal edges of the table. She activated the thermal probe. 0 heat registered. The figure tilted toward her, revealing a dark void at its core. Her reflection trembled in the glossy exterior of the surgical lamp. The walls bent around it, as though reality recoiled from its presence. A cold draft spiraled upward from the floor. At 1:23 minutes after 1, the overhead lights dimmed. A soft click echoed in the corridor outside the door. Her heart skipped. The scanner display fractured, mapping the walls in shifting geometric patterns. A low whisper vibrated beneath the static hiss-on echo beneath human hearing. Her hands trembled. She steadied her breath and reached for the clipboard propped on the stainless tray. Each page bore her own steady handwriting, detailing every reading, but the words blurred. She blinked, and the notes read differently, forever changed. She stood and touched the door's cooling metal handle. The corridor beyond was empty, lit by a single failing bulb. The storm's rain streaked along the corridor window, casting streaks of light across the flickering walls. 1 hour 14 minutes into the recording, archivist's note, audio spike detected at subsonic frequency. The monitor's beeping halted. She looked back at the patient. The anomaly had disappeared. Only the steady drip of saline punctuated the silence. The dropper's tube glowed faintly in the dim red light. Her gloved hand lifted the thermal probe once more. Zero heat remained. Rain rattled the vents. She turned to the infrared scanner, expecting the green glow to fade. Instead, it brightened, casting spectral shadows that danced across the floor. The shape pulsed into existence again, but this time along the walls. It stretched into thin tendrils that crept toward the instrument tray, as if sensing the steel's cold. Dr. Marlowe's gloved fingers clenched. She tapped commands into the scanner. Live capture mode engaged. Small red lights blinked along the motion capture camera at the corner of the room. The anomaly recoiled like a wounded creature, then surged forward in a fluid motion. It wrapped around the surgical lamp's stem, compressing as though the lamp's light was poison. The beam fractured into shards of red glass. She lunged toward the controls, but her foot slipped in the wet. The world tilted. The lamps swung overhead, their restraints creaking. Water dripped from ceiling vents. She caught herself against the table. A cold shock ran through her arm, where the lamp had grazed her. Her glove felt damp inside. At 1:37 minutes after 1, the monitor surged back to life. The heart rate beep returned steady. The anomaly collapsed into a single point of shimmering black light, then vanished. In its place lay a single drop of dark liquid on the patient's gown. She froze. Her breath came shallow and quick. The drip of the saline stood out like a ticking clock. She lifted the gown with trembling fingers. The droplet absorbed into the fabric without leaving a stain. The room's temperature climbed by 2 degrees. The static hiss faded into the hum of the ventilators. She reached for the clipboard again. The notes had rewritten themselves. Words spelled out one question: "What are you?" A distant thunderclap rattled the walls. The storm pressed against the institute like an unseen weight. She glanced back at the scanner. The readout displayed a new entry: ambient electromagnetic fluctuation rising. Her radio crackled. The voice of the night shift supervisor came through, distorted. "Report. Everything normal." Dr. Marlowe swallowed. Her lips felt dry. She whispered, "Affirmative," then cut the connection. The corridor light outside the door flickered twice more, then died. Darkness pressed against the frame. The scanner pulsed in soft green beats, as though alive. She exhaled, steadying her racing pulse. Carefully, she stepped away from the table. The dark liquid droplet glistened on the gown as she snapped a photograph with her device. The red hue of the surgical lamp bathed the image in warmth. 1 hour, 42 minutes into the recording. Archivist's note: motion sensors detected unauthorized movement beyond room perimeters. Dr. Marlowe set the camera aside. She placed the gown into a sealed evidence bag, each movement precise, but her glove caught on the table edge. The bag fell, its clasp snapping open. The gown unfurled, and the dark spot reappeared. Only now, it pulsed softly, as though heartbeat-like. Her breath caught in her throat. She leaned forward, hand trembling. The droplet pulsed again, then stretched into a thin line across the fabric. It writhed, like a living seam. The scanner on her belt chimed an alert. Red light streamed from its screen, spelling words, "Containment breach imminent." Her radio crackled once more. "Dr. Marlowe, status." She did not answer. She stared at the droplet as it expanded across the gown. The red surgical lamp flickered violently. The walls warped, bending inward like in a funhouse mirror. She reached out and pressed the scanner's kill switch. Everything went dark. No hum, no hiss, no drip. Only her ragged breath echoed in the void. In that silence, she heard it a whisper, clear as day. "You should not have done that." She jolted upright as the lights snapped on. The gown lay empty on the floor. The scanner read 0 fluctuation. The monitors blinked back to life. She exhaled in relief until she saw it. The dark liquid had splattered across the floor, forming the shape of a Border Collie paw print. It resumed at 2:02 minutes, after 2 in the morning. Dr. Marlowe pressed her palm to the cool wall beside the door, feeling the grooves of the metal paneling beneath her glove. The storm's distant rumble had faded into a low, constant murmur. She paused, listening to the soft drip of the dark liquid onto the tile floor, an erratic metronome, marking the Anomaly's lingering presence. The corridor beyond room 13 lay deserted, bathed in the pale, unsteady glow of emergency lighting. Shadows flickered against the walls as heavy rain lashed the Institute's outer windows. She inhaled a steadying breath, tasting the sharp tang of ozone mixed with antiseptic. Every breath felt charged, electric, as if the air itself carried residual energy from the disturbance within. Sliding the door's latch shut behind her, she noted the backup generator's steady hum at 65 decibels, a futile struggle against forces beyond circuitry. Inside the room, the red surgical lamp pulsed like a slow, warning heartbeat. Instruments on the stainless tray gleamed with condensation, their edges softened by droplets clinging in the humid air. The temperature hovered just above 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and every surface felt slick underfoot. At 2:14 minutes after 2, she flipped on the infrared scanner. A pale green glow spread across the tiled floor, illuminating every crack and seam. Her breath fogged the scanner's lens as she swept the beam across the walls, the ceiling vents, and the operating table. The readout displayed only baseline readings, no sign of the shape that had tormented her an hour earlier. Ambient electromagnetic fluctuation lingered at a low constant, but the scanner's log indicated a gradual upward drift. She retrieved the sealed evidence bag from the stainless tray. Inside lay the patient's gown, white fabric now etched with a network of fine scorch marks. She lifted the gown to eye level, studying the pattern. The scorch lines formed one long, jagged seam, like a wound stitched by shadow itself. The fabric glowed faintly red under the infrared lamp. The noise of her heartbeat filled her ears as she pressed a gloved fingertip to the scorched seam. A flutter of static ran through the scanner strapped to her wrist. At 2:27 minutes after 2, a soft click sounded from within the room. Dr. Marlowe spun toward the motion capture camera perched on its tripod in the corner. Its red recording lights were dark. The power indicator blinked off. She frowned, stepping closer to inspect it. The camera's lens reflected her tense expression. She reached out and toggled the power switch. The red lights blinked twice, then glowed steadily. The feed on the camera's small monitor displayed the room in stark monochrome. She studied the image. The table, the tray, the lamp, the sealed evidence bag. All appeared unchanged except in the far corner, where the edges of the frame rippled. The distortion shimmered like heat haze, bending the straight lines of the tile floor. Her pulse quickened. She tapped the camera's record button and then placed it back on its tripod. At 2:35 minutes after 2, the distortion solidified. Thin tendrils of black light seeped from the corner where the wall met the floor. They snaked along the grout lines toward the instrument tray, reaching toward the gleaming steel with deliberate slowness. Dr. Marlowe swallowed, her throat dry. She moved to the tray and gripped its edge, hoping to keep the instruments between herself and whatever emerged. The tendrils paused, as if considering her presence. She held her breath as they recoiled, then surged upward in a twisting spiral, wrapping around the lamp stem once more. The lamp's red glow fractured into jagged shards across the walls. At 2:41 minutes after 2, the frayed lamp casing split with a dry crack. The light slashed across the ceiling in blind streaks. Water dripped from a vent above, each droplet sizzling where it touched the tendrils, emitting faint pops that echoed in the charged silence. She activated the room's intercom. Her voice was steady but low. "Supervisor, we have movement containment at risk." She hit the release button, but only static hissed back. No response came. The tendrils pulsed in unison, writhing faster now, as though fed by each heartbeat in the room. In a sudden blur, they vanished. The room plunged into half-light, one side bathed in red glare, the other lit by stark emergency white. The instruments lay undisturbed, but the scorch seam still bisected the gown inside its sealed bag. She exhaled slowly, steadying her breath. The gown trembled in the bag, ripples of smoke faintly visible beneath the plastic. Sparks of white-hot energy danced along the scorched seam, crackling like miniature thunder. Her scanner chimed an alert. She strapped it to her wrist and glanced down. Live feed terminated. The screen flickered off, then displayed the words "data corrupted." The backup generator's hum deepened for a moment before returning to its steady drone. Dr. Marlowe approached the evidence bag. She lifted it and set it on the tray. Her glove caught on the bag's edge, tearing the seal. The gown slipped free, unfolding itself on the tray as if sighing. Sparks cascaded along the scorch seam, then vanished. Leaving faint smudges of soot, she grabbed the tray's edge, sending a small ripple through her nerves. She snapped her hand to the scanner and pressed record. At 2:48 minutes after 2, the scanner began logging electromagnetic, thermal, and spatial metrics. The numbers scrolled too fast to read, then settled into columns spelled out in words. She stared at the gown. The scorched seam began to writhe, shifting its shape. It pulsed like a heartbeat, stretching into thin tendrils that crawled across the fabric. By the time she understood what was happening, the gown had grown dark veins that writhed under the infrared glow. At 2:57 minutes after 2, the gown convulsed. The tendrils snapped upward, latching onto the tray's rail. Steel ground against fabric as the gown crept toward the lamp. Sparks flew where fabric met metal. A high-pitched whine pierced the room, and the metal instruments vibrated in a silent chorus. She backed away, heart pounding. The gown slid off the tray in slow motion, landing on the floor with a whisper. The tendrils followed it, sinking into the grout. A shockwave of cold radiated through the room, dropping the temperature by 5 degrees in seconds. Her breath fogged in front of her. At 3:04 minutes after 3, the intercom crackled. A voice, distorted and distant. "Report status. Are you secure?" The question rattled her. She lifted the scanner to broadcast. "Containment failure. The anomaly has breached material boundaries." The voice hesitated. Static hissed. "Then, evacuate immediately. Seal room 13. She swallowed. Her gloves felt damp. She turned toward the door and froze. The corridor light beyond was out. Darkness pressed against the frame. Only a thin strip of red glow seeped under the door's edge. The gown's tendrils had extended beyond the room's threshold, wrapping around the leg of the tray as if anchoring a ship to a dock. They pulsed once, twice, then recoiled. The gust of wind from the opening door snuffed out the red lamp, plunging everything into darkness, silence. No hum, no hiss, no drip, only the soft thud of her own heartbeat. Then she heard a slow creak of the door hinge. The recording resumed at 3:11 minutes after 3 in the morning. Dr. Marlowe's breath echoed in her ears as she pressed her back against the cool steel door. The corridor beyond lay submerged in darkness, broken only by a faint red glow seeping through the crack at her feet. The storm's distant growl had faded into muffled rumblings, like the restless breath of something half-forgotten. She pushed the door open a fraction. The red light pulsed on the opposite wall, casting angular shadows across the sealed corridor. Her gloved hand trembled as she reached for the biometric panel beside the door. The mechanical hiss of the emergency lock release sounded unnaturally loud in the charged silence. At 3:20 minutes after 3, she stepped into the hallway. Water dripped from ceiling vents in uneven pulses, each drop striking the tile floor with a dull click. The air felt thinner here, crackling with residual energy. She clipped her scanner to her belt and switched to spatial mapping mode. Words scrolled across the display in slow, deliberate text, magnetic flux irregularities increasing. The corridors stretched unnaturally, walls pulsing as if breathing. Rainwater pooled in rivulets along the floor, tracing dark lines toward the sealed stairwell door. Each droplet sent ripples of distortion through her scanner's feed. The motion capture camera she'd left outside whirred softly, its red light blinking in the gloom. At 3:27 minutes after 3, she approached the door to room 13. The red surgical lamp's glow spilled under its bottom edge. The scorch-seam tendrils had crept beneath the door, pulsing like ink beneath glass. She pressed her glove against the cold metal frame, noting a faint warmth where the tendrils touched. The sensation sent a shiver up her spine. She exhaled, steadying her pulse, and activated the room's infrared overlay. The tendrils glowed jet black against the pale green beam. Ambient electromagnetic fluctuations spiked on her wrist scanner, sending it into a rapid chirp of alerts. The readout scrolled too fast to parse, then stilled on a warning spelled out in words. Containment breach expanding. Dr. Marlowe's heartbeat hammered in her ears. She unclipped the evidence bag from her belt, hoping to reclaim control. Inside lay the patient's gown, pristine and white. But as she lifted it, the scorch seam writhed, like living veins beneath the fabric. The tendrils lashed out, anchoring the gown to the tray. She snapped the bag's clasp, but the plastic split under pressure. For a heartbeat, the gown hung suspended in midair, tendrils thrashing in slow motion. Sparks erupted where fabric met steel, each flash reflecting off the broken shards of surgical lamp casing strewn across the floor. Then the gown collapsed, landing in a silent heap amid dark puddles. Its seams pulsed once more, illuminating the room in fractured patterns. At 3:13 minutes after 3, the tendrils recoiled into the gown. The fabric contracted, as though consumed by its own shadow, until only a dark blot remained. The blot pulsed twice, then vanished, leaving the gown pristine once more. A tremor shook the corridor, as though the institute itself had inhaled sharply. Dr. Marlowe's scanner chimed again. She raised it, its green glow revealing the walls rippling like liquid metal. The exit corridor looped back toward room 13 whenever she turned her head. There was no true path. Outnoy loops folding into themselves. Her radio crackled to life. The night shift supervisor's voice came through, distant and distorted. Status report. She brought the scanner to her mouth. Containment compromised. Corridor unstable. Recommend immediate extraction team. Static hissed. Then the line went dead. The emergency lights flickered. The red surgical lamp above the door reactivated, its pulse accelerating. The tendrils surged from the blank wall beside her, wrapping around her boot. Cold shot up her leg. She yanked, but they tightened their grip like living cables. At 3:47 minutes after 3, the motion capture camera outside shut off. The corridor fell silent. Only the generator's hum persisted and a whisper beneath it, urgent and clear. "You cannot leave." Dr. Marlowe lifted her scanner and hit the kill switch. Instantly, the tendrils slackened. The wall ripples stilled. The red lamp dimmed to a soft glow. She exhaled in ragged relief as the door beside her clicked. Automatic lock re-engaged. The corridor's geometry settled back to normal. Only the shattered lamp and empty gown remained evidence of the breach. She stepped over the jagged glass and strode toward the exit panel, each booted footstep echoing in the narrow hall. The storm outside pounded against reinforced windows, a relentless percussion that matched her racing pulse. At 3:59 minutes after 3, she reached the stairwell. The red emergency light bathed her in scarlet hues. She paused at the threshold, glancing back. Room 13's door stood closed, its lamp dark. No sign of movement. She felt its presence, cold and watchful. She engaged the stairwell release. The metal stairs groaned under her weight as she descended into darkness. Each step reverberated like a final heartbeat at 4:07 minutes after 4. The stairwell emergency light flickered and died, plunging her into pitch black. Only the faint glow of her scanner remained. She clipped it to her chest and pressed deeper into the void, heartbeat echoing. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She forced herself onward, counting steps in her mind to maintain orientation. 20 steps down. 30. Each number spelled out in words on her scanner's display. The air grew colder still, chills creeping through her uniform. At 4:18 minutes after 4, she sensed movement, a soft scuttle on the step behind her. She spun, scanner beam cutting through shadows. Nothing, only the drain pipes rattled. With each gust of wind, she advanced another dozen steps. The scanner's feed stuttered. Walls rippled again, folding corridors onto themselves. Panic clawed at her chest. She slammed her palm against the opposite wall. Steel met steel, solid and unyielding. Relief flooded her until she noticed the scorched seam trailing up the wall, pulsing like a vein. Her flashlight flickered to life in her other hand. The beam danced across concrete rails, etched with bizarre burn marks, lines that pulsed in time with her racing pulse. At each juncture, the scanner logged data, thermal gradient anomaly, and spatio-temporal distortion detected. At 4:27 minutes after 4, she reached the bottom landing. The door to the loading bay lay ahead, a heavy steel barrier. She lifted her head and read the panel. Manual override required. She slid her scanner's emergency blade across the lock cover, exposing wiring. Sparks flew. The override switch glowed red. She flipped it. The door shuddered and swung open, revealing the dimly lit ramp leading to the loading docks. Rainwater pooled across the concrete floor, illuminated by stray emergency streetlights. The rumble of distant thunder rolled overhead. She stepped into the loading bay. The ramp descent felt endless. Each step echoed in the cavernous space. Her scanner chimed, electromagnetic flux at critical threshold. She clutched the scanner, shining its beam across stacked crates and old equipment. Shadows danced like ghosts between pallets. At 4:36 minutes after 4, the scanner's beam caught a smear of dark liquid on the ramp, fresh and glistening. She knelt, heart pounding, and brought the scanner close. The readout spelled one word in bold: arise. Her breath caught. Every muscle tensed as the bay lights dimmed, leaving the loading bay in near darkness. The storm's wind howled through the open doors like a chorus of distant voices. She rose slowly, scanning for movement. The ramp behind her lay smooth and empty. Then she felt a presence at her shoulder. She spun, scanner beam slicing the dark. Silence. Only the rumble of thunder answered. She exhaled, knuckles white on the scanner. She turned back toward the exit, only to find the ramp stretched away into blackness, endless. The recording resumed at 4:45 minutes after 4 in the morning. Dr. Marlowe lay prone on the cold concrete floor of the loading bay, scanner beam wavering as she struggled to rise. Her uniform was damp with rainwater, and the air tasted of ozone and rust. The cavernous space echoed with distant thunder, each rumble vibrating through the metal ramps and stacked crates. She clutched her scanner in one hand and the emergency flashlight in the other. The beam cut through shadows, illuminating dark smudges along the walls, fresh footprints of dark liquid leading deeper into the bay. Her pulse thundered as she pressed herself to her feet, scanning for any sign of movement. At 4:53 minutes after 4, she moved toward the far corner where the liquid trail vanished. The crates there were stacked unevenly, forming a makeshift tunnel of wood and steel. Each step kicked up a faint echo. The scanner chimed. Thermal anomaly detected, 0 heat. Words scrolled. Sub-zero energy pocket. She inhaled, steadying her breath, and squeezed through the gap between crates. The tunnel led to a small alcove housing old maintenance equipment, the decommissioned generator and rusted tool racks. The walls here were etched with scorch lines that pulsed faintly in the scanner's view. Water dripped from a leaky pipe, creating ripples in a shallow pool at her feet. Each ripple distorted the scanner feed, as if reality wavered at the water's edge. At 5:02 minutes after 5, she found the source of the liquid, a dark stain spreading from the base of the generator. The pool shimmered with black iridescence, reflecting her flashlight beam in shifting patterns. She crouched and placed a gloved fingertip on its surface. The liquid recoiled as though alive, rippling away. Her scanner registered rapid electromagnetic spikes and spatial shifts. Words printed slowly. Localized breach point identified. She rose, heart pounding. The alcove's ceiling vents rattled, releasing a hiss of steam that fogged the scanner's lens. She wiped it clear and scanned upward. The vents were coated in dark residue, streaked like ink trails. Beneath one vent, the wall pulsed a faint bulge moving like a heartbeat. At 5:15 minutes after 5, she activated the motion capture camera on her belt. Small red lights blinked to life, mapping the alcove in 30 frames per second. The feed displayed the generator and the surrounding walls. She pressed record and stepped back. The pool of liquid began to ripple violently. From its center, a tendril of shadow shot upward, lashing against the generator's casing. Sparks flew where it struck, illuminating the alcove in flickers. Dr. Marlowe swallowed hard and tapped commands into her scanner. It began logging thermal, magnetic, and spatial data at once. The tendril recoiled, then struck again, each impact warping the metal. The generator's old engine stuttered, emitting a low groan. The tendril wrapped around a power conduit and squeezed. Sparks erupted in a silent flash, and the alcove plunged into darkness. Emergency lights in the bay snapped on, bathing the space in cold white. She shielded her eyes and counted to 4. When she lowered her arm, the alcove was empty. No tendril, no liquid, only scorch marks and a pool of clear water. Her scanner chimed. Data corrupted. She frowned and restarted the device. It booted with a slow whine, then displayed a single message spelled in words. Ceiling breach. She backed out of the alcove and toward the main bay. The emergency lights flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the crates. The loading bay exit lay beyond a heavy roll-up door at the far end. She sprinted, boots slapping concrete, scanner and flashlight beams racing ahead. At 5:28 minutes after 5, she reached the door release panel. She pressed the override. Nothing happened. The panel was lifeless. She slapped it with her gloved hand. Sparks flickered in the wiring overhead, then dimmed. The roll-up door remained closed, its edges sealed by frost on the metal frame. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She turned to find another exit, but the only other path was the stairwell, now several flights up and out of her way. She glanced at her scanner. Spatial mapping unstable. Corridor loops detected. Panic rose. The bay's emergency strobes pulsed, syncing with her heartbeat. At 5:36 minutes after 5, she heard at a distant creak, like steel bending under weight. She swung her flashlight beam toward the sound. In the far shadows, a shape slithered into view. A coil of pulsating darkness, its surface rippling with iridescent veins. It moved with deliberate intent, each motion smooth and calculated. She swallowed. Her mouth felt dry. She raised her scanner and hit record. The shape advanced, tendrils unfurling like blind serpents. Each tendril pulsed with cold light. The air temperature dropped instantly, frost forming on the crates. The scanner displayed falling readings, ambient temperature dropping rapid. At 5:42 minutes after 5, the tendrils lashed out, wrapping around a crate and crushing wood as easily as paper. Splinters flew. The shape reared back, then struck the ground, sending a tremor through the bay. She staggered, but kept the scanner steady. The motion capture camera on her belt beeped. Low battery. The red light winked out. She cursed under her breath and slapped at no power. The shape's tendrils reached her. She backed into a pallet, scattering empty boxes. The tendrils wrapped around her ankle. Cold radiated through her leg, chasing the blood from her veins. She lifted her scanner high. At 5:50 minutes after 5, she hit the kill switch. Instantly, the tendrils recoiled, releasing her. She fell back, heart hammering. The shape withdrew into the darkness, disappearing between crates. The bay lights steadied. Frost melted from the doorframe. The roll-up door's control panel flickered back to life. She staggered to her feet and sprinted to the panel. Her gloved fingers danced over the controls. With a metallic groan, the door began to rise. Rain and stormlight flooded the bay. She shielded her eyes and ran through the opening into the night. Scanner and flashlight abandoned on the floor behind her. Outside, the wind lashed her face. Thunder cracked overhead. She sprinted toward the perimeter fence, each breath painful in her chest. She didn't stop until the Institute's lights were far behind. The recording picked up again at 8 minutes after 6 in the morning. The sky above St. Augustine Medical Institute was bruised with pre-dawn gray clouds, and rain fell in relentless sheets that rattled against the armored SUVs. Dr. Marlowe's boots pounded wet gravel as she raced toward the perimeter gates, each step sloshing in puddles pooled in the tire ruts. She carried only her tattered clipboard and a single flashlight. Her scanner lay abandoned in the loading bay, its last readings still lost to the breach. At 6:16 minutes after 6, she reached the security checkpoint. The guard post sat empty beneath a flickering neon sign. Authorized personnel only. The windshield of the parked patrol truck was streaked with rain, and its engine was silent. She pressed her palm against the biometric reader on the gate control panel. No response. The display glowed faintly. System offline. A distant rumble of thunder rolled across the compound as she ducked beneath the slowly descending steel barrier. The gate's automatic lockdown had been engaged. She sprinted down the perimeter road toward the East Ridge, heart hammering in her chest. Rainwater soaked through her uniform, chilling her to the bone. Every breath tasted like ozone mixed with adrenaline. At 6:24 minutes after 6, she reached the emergency communication kiosk. Its small canopy offered little shelter from the storm. She slapped the call button, and the speaker crackled before a distorted voice replied, "State your emergency." Her voice came out in a rasp. "This is Dr. Marlowe. I require extraction to the East Ridge. Containment breach in room 13. Multiple casualties confirmed." Silence. Then the voice spoke again, slower this time. Coordinates acknowledged. "Extraction team en route. ETA. 10 minutes." She exhaled, pressing her back against the cold steel of the kiosk. Rain pelted her face as she watched the empty road stretch into darkness, the Institute's silhouette looming like a wounded beast behind her. At 6:35 minutes after 6, headlights appeared around the Bentoo black SUVs, rolling to a halt beside her with sputtering rooftop strobes. The passenger door of the lead vehicle opened, and a figure stepped into the rain. The Institute's security chief, his gear plastered to his body by the storm. "Dr. Marlowe," he called, voice clipped. "Get in now." She glanced back at the Institute one last time. Emergency lights flickered in scattered windows, and dark trails stained the courtyards below. She climbed into the SUV's cold metal interior and shut the door, the thud echoing through the empty cabin. At 6:42 minutes after 6, the convoy moved. The road to the East Ridge wound through service lanes and guard towers, each turned slick with rain. The SUV's tires hissed on wet asphalt. Her hands trembled as she rested them on her knees, eyes fixed on the windshield. She cleared her throat. What happened to the field agents? The security chief's face remained set and unreadable. 2 agents went in after you. They never came out. Alarms sounded across multiple sectors. We attempted containment protocols, but power failures forced lockdown. His voice was low, carrying over the storm's roar. She swallowed. Her throat felt raw. Is anyone else inside? He hesitated. We lost all sensor feeds at room 13. No visual confirmation since 5:52 hours. We have no way to know. Lightning forked across the sky as the SUVs climbed the rocky service road to the ridge overlook. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the vehicles. At 6:55 minutes after 6, they reached the fence line. Spotlights along the ridge bathed the compound below in harsh white beams that cut through the rain. She pressed herself against the open hatchback, rain dripping down her collar. She clutched the recovered scanner in one hand. The device had rebooted and displayed partial logs before glitching out. Words scrolled in jagged bursts. Containment breach concluded. Her pulse slammed in her ears. She looked up at the security chief. What does that mean? He closed his eyes, voice tight. It means we don't know if it's over. Rainwater beaded on her flashlight as she knelt to examine the scanner's logs. The last entry read, Anomaly transition complete, awaiting external stimuli. She pressed her fingertip to the screen. The words shifted into a new line, Arise. She looked up at the Institute's silhouette, its windows lit by intermittent emergency strobes. Somewhere inside, shadows still moved. At 2 minutes after 7, the convoy's engines cut. The night fell silent except for the steady drum of rain. She sighed and pocketed the scanner, standing again on trembling legs. She brushed rain-soaked hair from her face. We go back in, she said, voice firm despite fatigue. The security chief nodded once. His hand hovered near his sidearm. Suit yourself, he said quietly, but you go alone. She didn't argue. She stepped from the SUV into knee-deep puddles along the fence. The spotlights washed her in strobe-like flashes. She strode to the fence's manual gatehold, heavy wrought iron with an override crank. Each turn of the wheel was a battle with rust and water. But she persisted until the gate swung open with a groan. Beyond lay the Institute's rear service entrance, a dimly lit concrete corridor sloping downward. The open door revealed dripping water and smeared footprints black liquid that glistened under her flashlight. She inhaled, tasting the sharp sting of chlorine from nearby decontamination valves. At 7:10 minutes after 7, she stepped inside. The corridor lights flickered long hums between pulses. Each section of hallway was tagged with department markers, their letters peeling: storage, maintenance, biohazard. She paused by a wall panel scrawled in marker, "Do not enter." Her heart pounded as she advanced. The floor beneath her boots was slick with water and something darker. Her flashlight beam danced across metal crates, abandoned equipment, and overturned cleaning carts. The only sound was her breath and a subtle click echoing from behind a stack of supply lockers. At 7:17 minutes after 7, she reached a T-junction flagged for medical archives. The sign's arrow pointed left, but the other corridor beyond was pitch black. She hesitated, then switched on the infrared overlay on her flashlight. The walls shimmered in pale green. She caught movement at the end of the left corridor, tendrils of shadow pulsing near a side door marked Archive Room C. She stepped forward, each footfall measured, slow, deliberate. The scanner on her belt chimed softly, ambient electromagnetic fluctuation rising. She watched the door's monitoring light blink red, then flicker off. The door's window was cracked, a spiderweb of fractures radiating from the center. She pressed her gloved palm against the cool glass. At 7:25 after 7, she pushed the door open. Inside, rows of sealed cabinets stood silent. The air was suffocatingly still, smelling of old paper and bleach. A single overturned evidence cart lay in the center, its contents spilled, sealed envelopes, paper logs, and one open notebook whose pages were stained with dark liquid. She approached the cart. The dark liquid formed tendrils across the pages, rewriting text into jagged symbols and questions. "What did you see?" The notebook's spine creaked, as though alive. She reached for it, but the scanner chimed, warning data, corruption imminent. The letters on the pages shifted and blurred, as if resisting her gaze. At 7:33 after 7, she heard a creak behind her. She spun, flashlight beams slicing the gloom. The corridor beyond the door was empty, but in the far corner of the archive, a shadow moved. It stretched, then recoiled like a wounded creature. She raised her scanner and hit record. Tendrils of darkness snaked along the floor toward her feet. Each pulse of the scanner sent ripples through the room's geometry. Cabinets bowed inward, their doors warping. She backed toward the cart, snapping the notebook shut and lifting it to her chest. The tendrils lashed out, wrapping around a metal shelf and dragging it toward the center of the room. At 7:42 after 7, the shelves collided with the cart, sending files cascading like a waterfall of paper. The notebook slid from her grasp, opening to a blank page. Then text appeared, spelled in blood-red letters, "You cannot leave." Her breath came in ragged gasps. She lunged for the door, but it slammed shut with a thunderous bang. The lights flickered out, leaving only the green glow of her infrared overlay. The tendrils surged in unison, converging on the notebook as it lay on the floor. She clawed at the door handle locked. The scanner chirped, "Containment override required." She slammed her palm against the control panel beside the door. Sparks flew from exposed wiring. The display blinked. Override failed. A low whisper vibrated beneath the darkness. "Stay." She pressed her back against the door, heart pounding. The tendrils wrapped around her ankles, tugging her toward the notebook. She raised her flashlight and hit the kill switch on her scanner. Instantly, the green glow vanished. The whispers ceased. The tendrils recoiled. The door clicked, unlocking in the sudden silence. She stumbled through, slamming the door shut behind her. The corridor lights sputtered back to life, revealing a flooded hallway stretching toward the main lobby. Her boots sank into standing water. She sputtered, wiping rainwater from her eyes. At 7:50, 1 minute after 7, she reached the central stairwell. Floodlights in the lobby flashed, revealing overturned chairs and dark stains seeping through the floor tiles. The front doors lay open, wind and rain whipped through the entrance. She descended the stairs 2 at a time, soaked and exhausted, every muscle protesting. At 8:05 after 8, she emerged into the lobby. The storm's fury was on full display. Lightning illuminated the shattered glass of the main doors. Thunder shook the building's frame. She paused beneath the grand chandelier, its crystals dull and coated in dust. A final flash of lightning revealed a single smear of dark liquid on the marble floor, forming the shape of a Border Collie paw print. Her breath caught. The scanner on her belt rebooted one last time, blinking into life with a final message. Archival transmission sealed. She exhaled, voice trembling as she whispered, "End of recording." The recording resumed at 8:23 after 8 in the morning. Dawn's first light seeped through storm clouds, casting the Institute in a sickly, oil-slick gray. Dr. Marlowe stood ankle-deep in water beneath the shattered lobby's grand chandelier, its crystals swaying gently as if still alive. Each breath felt like frost in her lungs, and every echo of dripping rain magnified the hush that followed the storm. She dropped to one knee, fingertips brushing a dark paw print stain on the marble floor. The pattern pulsed faintly, as though beating in time with her heart. Her scanner, mysteriously operational again, chirped with new readings. Residual electromagnetic anomaly detected. Words scrolled slowly across its screen. Phase instability rising. Structural integrity compromised. At 8:30, 2 minutes after 8, she rose, wiping rainwater from her eyes. The lobby beyond the broken doors was littered with debris, overturned chairs, twisted metal rails, and shattered glass that glittered like dangerous confetti. The red emergency strobes still blinked, painting everything in harsh crimson. She secured her flashlight to her belt and clipped the scanner to her jacket, its faint glow offering the only stable light. She exhaled and headed for the grand staircase leading back to room 13. Each step sent water splashing, its surface revealing ripples of dark liquid beneath the clear veneer. The chandelier overhead tinkled softly, its pendants singing in the rising drafts. The smell of damp concrete mingled with antiseptic and the sharp temps of ozone. At 8:41 minutes after 8, she reached the top landing. The corridor lights flickered overhead, revealing scorch marks along the walls, long crooked lines that throbbed with residual heat. Her scanner logged each anomaly in text: thermal gradient spike, spatio-temporal distortion, magnetic flux collapse. She ran her gloved finger across a burn scar shaped like a rune, noting its crisp edges and the way it leached cold. Stopping before the door to room 13, she cleared her throat. The red lamp above was nothing more than dangling wires. The door itself was warped, each contour softened by heat and force. Her reflection wavered in the scorched metal surface. She gripped the handle and pushed inward. Inside, the operating theater lay silent and still. The steel table was empty, no patient gown, no shattered lamp, no tendrils of shadow. The infrared overlay showed only a cold void, but the walls whispered. Thin, rune-like scorch patterns pulsed faintly, as if breathing. Droplets of water dripped from overhead vents, each splash echoing into the hush. At 8:50 minutes after 8, she exhaled and activated her scanner's datalog mode. It began streaming words. Containment breach threshold exceeded. Phase variance, critical containment secure, temporary. She sank to one knee beside the table, gently brushing away a shard of glass. Beneath it lay a single drop of viscous black liquid. She pressed her fingertip to the drop. It quivered, spreading into a perfect circle. The floor beneath her vibrated as a deep hum rose in pitch, resonating through steel beams and broken tile. The scanner's chirp became frenzied. Warning: phase breach imminent. Words scrolled. Containment secure until next cycle. At 9:03 minutes after 9, the drop ruptured upward in slow motion, forming a shadowy tendril that whipped across the table and coiled around her wrist. Cold shot through her veins, each pulse stealing warmth from her core. She slammed the kill switch on her scanner. The light died. The hum ceased. Silence returned, absolute and crushing. She wrenched her arm free, leaving a smear of dark liquid on her glove. Her breath came in ragged sobs, visible in the frigid air. The scanner rebooted itself, screen flickering to display a final message in bold words. Containment secure until next cycle. At 9:14 minutes after 9, the corridor lights cut out, plunging the room into pitch darkness. Her flashlight flickered twice, then steadied. She backed toward the door, though the tendril had vanished. Scorch glyphs still glowed faintly on the walls like embers waiting to reignite. A flash of lightning outside illuminated the shattered surgical lamp casing strewn across the floor. Thunder rolled as she opened the door, only to find the corridor warped walls bending inward, ceiling folding like origami. Reality itself seemed to quiver. She staggered, gripping the frame until the world snapped back into alignment. The lights returned with a low hum. She exhaled, rubbing her wrist where the liquid had touched. No trace remained, glove and skin pristine. Only the scorch glyphs remained, dull scars on steel walls. She stepped into the corridor, cautious and deliberate. At 9:21 minutes after 9, her radio crackled to life. Dr. Marlowe, status. The security chief's voice sounded distant but urgent. She lifted the radio. Voice steady despite exhaustion. Containment cycle complete. Anomaly stabilized for now. Sending coordinates for protocol sweep. Static hissed. Then, acknowledged. Extraction team inbound. She turned off her scanner. Its screen went dark, leaving only the corridor lights to guide her. The glow revealed debris shifting in slight, unnatural motions, as if reality still breathed. At 9:29 minutes after 9, she arrived at the T-junction leading back to the main exit. The floor pooled with water, reflecting the flickering overhead lights. She paused, listening to her own heartbeat thrum in her ears. Then she advanced, each footstep measured against the dripping echoes. Thunder subsided. Dawn light strengthened, filtering through shattered windows. The storm had passed, but the Institute bore its wounds like a battle-scarred fortress. At 9:38 minutes after 9, she reached the front doors. The marble threshold was slick with water. The dark paw print stain no longer glowed, had faded into a dull mark on stone. She inhaled deeply, tasting freedom and frost. Before stepping outside, she turned back for one last glance. Room 13's door stood closed, its lamp wires still dangling. Scorch glyphs flickered faintly beneath their icy scars, waiting for their cycle to renew. She exhaled and crossed the threshold, boots splashing into rain-soaked pavement. The morning air bit at her cheeks. Behind her, the Institute's silhouette receded into gray gloom. Dr. Marlowe's final report confirms that the anomaly exhibited cyclic phase breaches marked by electromagnetic surges, spatio-temporal distortions, and tangible scorch glyphs, akin to ancient runic inscriptions. Containment protocols succeeded temporarily, relying on abrupt phase resets triggered by the kill switch failsafe. However, residual glyphs and trace liquids indicate persistent latent energy pockets requiring ongoing surveillance. Future procedures should integrate preemptive phase stabilization fields and enhanced spectral scanning to anticipate breach cycles. The intersection of forensic methodology and metaphysical phenomena underscores the need for interdisciplinary research and protocol refinement. End of transcript. Case File 006 is hereby sealed. This has been Case File 006. What the Border Collie surgeon saw after midnight. Unexplainable. Anomalies in Room 13. Filed, transcribed, and preserved in the record. The cases are many. The files are endless. And though they close here, remember, the anomalies do not stay bound by paper, nor by voice. They linger. They wait. If you choose to return, come prepared. Bring silence, bring patience, and leave your heartbeat unmeasured. Until the next anomaly finds you, the archivist will keep watch.